Imagine standing in the dense Honduran brush when a shadow rises out of the murky river water. It was not just a predator, but a prehistoric nightmare 10 feet tall before even uncoiling. Most men see things in war they want to forget, but I saw something completely impossible. I am Robert, a U.S. Army veteran who still carries the heavy weight of that humid December. December 1986 is a date forever etched into my mind by the dark secrets of the jungle. My unit, a U.S. Combat Engineering Battalion, was deployed to the rugged heart of Central America. We were operating out of Soto Cano Air Base, deep within the dangerous terrain of Honduras. Our mission involved supporting the Contras, but the land itself felt like our primary, ancient enemy. The heat of the jungle was like a wet wool blanket, heavy and suffocating every breath. We established an airfield just north of the Rio Coco, a place where legends come alive. The Rio Coco flowed like a dark ribbon through the thick, green canopy of the ancient forest. In that humidity, your gear feels twice as heavy and the shadows seem to move independently. What happens when the rules of engagement meet a monster that does not follow human laws? I stood there with my rifle, feeling 1,000-yard stare settle over my weary, sweat-soaked eyes. My time with the 27th Airborne Engineering Battalion prepared me for combat, but not for this. How do you report the truly impossible to a command structure that demands only the facts? Mentioning the wrong thing could lead to an Article 15 and the immediate end of a career. But some secrets are too massive to keep buried in the thick mud of a foreign land. Locals whispered about Titanoboa, a creature from a time before man ever walked the earth. They called it El Diablo, the devil that haunted the deep, murky bends of the Rio Coco. I used to laugh at those stories until the day the water began to churn violently. The silence of the jungle is never truly silent. It is a waiting, predatory kind of quiet. Every rustle in the undergrowth made us grip our weapons tighter in the sweltering afternoon heat. We were soldiers trained for war, yet we felt like small intruders in a much older domain. I was about to step directly into the territory of the beast they called El Diablo. The lines between reality and nightmare began to blur as we pushed deeper into the brush. Little did I know, this encounter would change the trajectory of my entire life forever. It was a moment where the modern military met a prehistoric force of sheer, cold-blooded power. This is the story of what we found lurking near that airfield north of the river. Prepare yourself, because the truth of the Rio Coco is far more terrifying than any fiction. Before the 27th Airborne Engineering Battalion arrived, the Rio Coco already whispered of ancient, hidden terrors. Local Hondurans lived in fear of the river, sensing something predatory lurking beneath the muddy surface. They spoke of a creature they called El Diablo, which literally translates to the devil. This was no recent legend, but a long-standing nightmare passed down through many fearful generations. Our local guides would stop dead in their tracks whenever we approached the murky water's edge. No amount of military authority from Soto Cano Air Base could force them into the brush. They whispered about the muertos, or the dead, who had vanished into the river without trace. The jungle air felt thick with a heavy silence that warned us to stay far away. While we prepared for the Contras, the locals were watching for something much more primal. To the villagers, El Diablo was not a metaphor, but a physical force of pure destruction. Every ripple in the Rio Coco carried the weight of 1,000 years of terrifying folklore. This prehistoric shadow had claimed this territory long before any modern soldier set foot here. Rumors of a massive Titanoboa echoed in their stories, though we didn't know the name then. The guide's eyes searched the banks for signs of a monster that defied all known logic. We were outsiders stepping into a curse that had already claimed countless lives over the centuries. This was not a one-time sighting, but a permanent resident of the dark, winding river. Even the toughest soldiers felt a chill when they looked into those deep, swirling river currents. Breaking the silence of the river felt like an invitation for El Diablo to rise once more. We ignored the local warnings, focused only on our mission for the Soto Cano Air Base. But as we moved closer, the legends of the Muertos began to feel disturbingly real. Little did we know, the devil of the Rio Coco was already watching our every move. To understand the weight of the silence that followed, you have to understand the powder keg Robert was dropped into. This wasn't just a construction mission. It was a front row seat to a global chess match with rigged landmines. Long before our arrival, a massive earthquake in 1971 had already left Nicaragua fractured and desperately vulnerable. Out of that devastation, the Sandinistas rose, a group of socialist rebels determined to seize total control. By the end of the 1970s, these revolutionaries successfully overthrew the established government in a bloody struggle. This new Sandinista regime didn't stand alone. They were heavily backed by the Soviet Union and Cuba. This was a region caught between two superpowers, where every shadow carried a hidden, ideological threat. Suddenly, the jungle wasn't just trees, it was a critical battlefield in the Cold War's grand design. Rising against the socialists were the Contras, counter-revolutionaries fighting a desperate war to reclaim their lost nation. After being hunted and run out of Nicaragua, the Contras sought safety within the thick Honduran brush. These mountains became a staging ground for a war that official maps barely even acknowledged existed. The United States covertly funneled money in the 80s to support these anti-communist fighters against the socialist regime. The money moved in secret, fueling a resistance that lived and died in the muddy river banks. The border was a tripwire, and Robert's unit was walking it in heavy, standard issue combat boots. How do you keep your head down when the entire world is watching the very border you regarding? Operating out of Soto Cano Air Base, we were the silent observers of a conflict that shouldn't exist. As part of the 27th Airborne Engineering Battalion, our job was building roads while history burned nearby. Was the jungle itself more dangerous than the Soviet-funded rebels waiting just across the dark river? The tension was thick enough to cut, a constant reminder that one wrong step could start a war. This political wildfire, the real reason why everything that happened on the Rio Coco remained classified. The government demanded absolute discretion because the political stakes in Central America were simply too high. If we dared to speak out, and Article 15 was the swiftest way the military would silence us. We were soldiers caught in a nightmare, guarding a border while something ancient stirred in the depths. They wanted us to forget El Diablo, a creature that looked like a living, breathing Titanoboa from prehistory. In a world this volatile, a giant snake was the last thing anyone wanted on an official report. Enter the 27th Airborne Engineering Battalion, moving out of Fort Bragg and straight into the jungle fire. They were told to build an airfield, but they were issued live ammo for a clear reason. It was a sign that engineering in these thick woods was just another word for survival. Robert was part of this specialized unit, carrying the weight of North Carolina into the deep unknown. Their destination was the remote village of Hamastron, a place where the jungle canopy swallowed the sun. Situated just 15 miles north of the Honduran border, the construction site sat on a razor's edge. Every shovel of dirt moved for the airfield felt like an invitation to the watchful, hidden shadows. Building that airfield was like trying to assemble a puzzle in the middle of a live range. Despite being engineers, the soldiers kept their rifles close and their eyes on the thick, green tree line. The issuance of live ammunition suggested that the military brass expected more than just heavy manual lifting. But with that firepower came a set of strict rules that often felt like a death sentence. Orders strictly forbade any direct combat with Nicaraguan forces unless the enemy pulled the trigger first. What good is live ammo if you are ordered not to use it during a sudden crisis? The tension hung heavy as they worked, knowing they could not defend themselves until it was late. This don't fire first rule turned every rustle in the leaves into a heart-stopping, deadly gamble. They were caught between the threat of the Contras and the absolute silence of the high command. Every soldier felt the suffocating pressure of these rules while deep in the heart of hostile territory. They were engineers by trade, but in Hamastron, they were little more than high stakes, stationary targets. Does do and fire first even apply to a predator that does not use a gun to kill? They were forbidden from firing unless fired upon. But the jungle had its own ancient, terrifying laws. No one told them what to do if the enemy waiting for them was not even human. The routine broke on a humid morning when the radio in my pack suddenly crackled to life. As a communications specialist for the 27th Airborne, I was the literal lifeline for our jungle patrol. We were deep in the brush, miles away from the relative safety of Soto Cano Air Base. To our west, that base sat over 200 kilometers away, unreachable if things went truly south. Our reality was the Rio Coco, the murky river serving as the official border with Nicaragua. It was a place of high tension, where we constantly watched for sudden movements from the Contras, but at 10:30 that morning, the signal I received wasn't about enemy soldiers or political rebels. The voice on the other end sounded tight, strained by a confusion I had never heard before. In a combat zone, every sound has a meaning, but this specific transmission felt like a warning. A voice crackled through the speaker, reporting a suspicious object moving upstream against the river's heavy current. My heart hammered against my ribs as I adjusted the dials, desperately trying to clear the static. In the heat of the jungle, a suspicious object usually meant a boat full of armed men. What qualifies as suspicious when you are already expecting an ambush from every dark, leafy shadow? The Rio Coco hides many secrets, but something moving upstream usually indicates a motor or trouble. Yet the report didn't mention engines, only a wake that defied the natural flow of the water. I leaned in closer to the receiver, feeling the jungle humidity cling to my skin like a shroud. This single radio transmission was the thread that would soon unravel our entire sense of reality. We were trained for war and survival, but nothing prepared us for the entity known as El Diablo. 10:30 a.m. marks the moment the jungle stopped feeling like a battlefield and became a nightmare. The message was clear. Something as massive as a prehistoric Titanoboa was approaching our hidden position. I looked at the dark water of the Rio Coco, wondering if the ancient legends were waking. I signaled the squad leader, my hands trembling slightly as the implications of the report sank in. We were the 27th Airborne Engineering Battalion, yet no amount of training prepares you for the impossible. Every second that passed brought that unknown presence closer to our vulnerable location on the muddy bank. I was the only link between safety and the unknown, and that unknown was now moving upstream. Leaving the idling vehicles behind, our squad began the slow march toward the dangerous Rio Coco. 3 of our men stayed back to guard the patrol vehicles and maintain our only exit. 6 of us proceeded on foot, slipping quietly into the tall grass of a sprawling cattle farm. We moved like ghosts through the grazing fields, our eyes scanning the horizon for any sudden movement. The air felt heavy and thick as we pushed deeper into the silence of the Honduran countryside. Why were the cattle so still, as if they were waiting for something to strike from above? Our mission was to establish a concealed observation post on the riverbank, nearly half a mile away. We reached the first section of rusted barbed wire fencing and carefully began the difficult crossing. One by one, we lifted the wire for each other, mindful not to snag our heavy gear. Every metallic creak of the fence sounded like a gunshot in the oppressive and humid midday quiet. Ahead of us lay a cleared field for cattle grazing, stretching nearly 100 yards wide. Crossing that open expanse felt like walking across a stage with 1,000 hidden eyes watching us. Soon, we encountered the second line of barbed wire, marking the boundary of the farm's territory. The physical effort of maneuvering through the sharp wire while staying silent tested our military discipline. Could you stay hidden if the very ground beneath your boots started to shift and move? We were entering a place where the locals whispered about El Diablo lurking in the muddy depths. As soldiers from the 27th Airborne Engineering Battalion, we knew the risks of operating near Soto Cano. Rumors of a massive Titanoboa-sized predator made every rustle in the grass feel like a death sentence. We weren't just looking for Contras anymore. We were looking for something far more ancient and hungry. Fear of an Article 15 was nothing compared to the primal dread creeping up my spine. My heart hammered against my ribs. As we finally approached the treacherous banks of the Rio Coco, we reached the thick tree line. 5 yards from the water's edge, and collectively held our breath. We stared through the dense leaves, knowing the Rio Coco held something ancient and incredibly dangerous. The journey here had been a grueling trek from our original rendezvous point earlier that day. That riverbank was actually about half a mile away from where we first started our patrol. Every step through the brush felt like walking deeper into a trap set by nature itself. Before us lay an opening in the jungle that seemed entirely out of place here. A massive field cleared for cattle grazing stretched out, measuring a full 100 yards wide. This man-made scar on the landscape offered no cover for anything trying to remain unseen. How could a monster like El Diablo move through such open ground without being spotted immediately? We had to consider the sheer scale of the terrain we were currently forced to navigate. The local geography provided the perfect hunting ground for a predator of truly prehistoric proportions. Our squad retreated into the safety of the tree line to maintain our tactical advantage. We stayed back roughly 5 to 8 yards from the muddy edge of the riverbank. From this hidden position, we watched the murky water ripple with a rhythmic, unsettling motion. It made me wonder if a Titanoboa could actually survive in these modern, disputed border waters. This area was a ghost zone, frequented only by the Contras and those who didn't want to be found. The men of the 27th Airborne Engineering Battalion weren't trained for what was lurking beneath. The vastness of the field made the river look like a silver thread in a green abyss. If a creature were massive, the deep bends of the Rio Coco offered perfect concealment. Even with the clear grazing field, the shadows near the water's edge remained thick and impenetrable. You might doubt the size, but the physical layout of the river banks tells a different story. Staying 5 to 8 yards back felt like a mile when the water started to churn. The silence in that clearing was heavy, pressing against our ears like the humid jungle heat. Its ability to vanish depended entirely on the steep drop-offs and the murky depth of the water. We were far from Soto Cano Air Base and any hope of immediate rescue if things went south. Somewhere in that 100-yard span of grass, the rules of biology were being completely rewritten. We gripped our rifles, eyes darting between the open field and the dark, swirling river currents. The geography wasn't just a backdrop, it was the primary reason El Diablo remained a myth. As we waited in the shadows, the water finally broke, revealing the nightmare we feared. Then, the water broke, shattering the surface of the Rio Coco with a heavy, wet thud. Our squad from the 27th Airborne Engineering Battalion scrambled back, seeking cover in the dense tree line. We remained hidden just 5 to 8 yards from the riverbank, holding our breath in absolute silence. What we initially thought was a drifting log suddenly began to rise against the murky current. It wasn't wood, it was a massive, muscular neck ascending like a hydraulic lift from hell. The creature's head rose 10, 12, then 15 feet into the humid jungle air above us. Thick, muddy water cascaded off its dark scales, creating a rhythmic splashing sound against the river. From our position near the Soto Cano Air Base territory, we watched the impossible become reality. The predator towered over the landscape, scanning the nearby clearing where the local cattle were grazing. Its massive head moved with a terrifyingly smooth precision that felt almost calculated and highly intelligent. Locals whispered of a creature they called El Diablo, which literally translates to the devil. Looking at that towering silhouette, it was clear why the name El Diablo was so fitting. How do you process a prehistoric nightmare that looms over your entire squad like a god? The giant snake seemed to ignore our presence, focusing its cold, yellow gaze on the helpless herd. Every soldier in our unit felt a primal fear that no amount of military training could prepare for. It stood there, a vertical monument of scales and muscle, dwarfing the trees along the muddy bank. The air grew heavy with the smell of wet earth and something ancient, predatory, and hungry. Even the sounds of the Honduran jungle went silent as the beast claimed its rightful domain. I gripped my rifle tighter, though I knew small arms would likely just annoy this massive predator. We were witnesses to a living legend that defied every law of nature we had ever known. The creature didn't look like a common snake. It looked like a prehistoric god surveying its kingdom. The predator didn't wait to admire the fear in our eyes before striking its heavy target. A full-grown cow was snatched and silenced in a heartbeat by the massive, shifting coils. It wasn't a struggle for survival. It was a total disappearance into a nightmare made flesh. How much power does it take to lift a heavy cow completely off its forefeet? The bovine didn't even have time to let out a single cry of pain or terror. El Diablo struck with the speed of a whip, wrapping its muscular body around the animal. Bones snapped like dry kindling as the 27th Airborne watched from the muddy river bank nearby. We stood frozen in the jungle heat, our hands trembling against the cold steel of rifles. What do you do when you realize your M16 might as well be a useless toothpick? The massive snake didn't just kill, it dominated the landscape with a terrifying and ancient efficiency. The poor cow was taken like a tiny mouse trapped in the sharp talons of a hawk. El Diablo opened its massive jaws, wide enough to swallow the entire animal in one motion. With a sickening crunch, the prehistoric monster secured its prey within its rows of backward curving teeth. I looked at the Rio Coco, seeing only the violent wake of a true apex predator. The snake picked up the entire cow in its mouth with an impossible display of strength. It began to drag the heavy carcass back toward the dark and murky depths of the water. We watched the massive head submerge, pulling the entire weight of the beast under the surface. The water churned and boiled as the Titan returned to its throne beneath the Rio Coco. In mere seconds, the river swallowed both the monster and its prey, leaving nothing but ripples. The silence that followed was heavier than the humid air pressing down on our squad's shoulders. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird as I processed what I witnessed. This wasn't just another patrol. This was a brush with a force of nature beyond comprehension. The jungle seemed to hold its breath as the last of the bubbles vanished from sight. I wondered how many men had disappeared into those waters before our battalion ever arrived here. We were soldiers trained for war, but nothing prepared us for the hunger of El Diablo. The snake was gone, but the squad remained, paralyzed by the scale of what they had seen. They did not just guess, they paced it out, measuring 34 steps of raw, impossible muscle. Sergeant Perez stood by the churned-up river bank, staring at the massive, muddy path left behind. We needed to know if our eyes were lying. So, we started counting the massive trail. Initial size estimates from the shaken patrol members ranged wildly from 50 to 100 feet long. It seemed impossible, a nightmare that defied every law of nature we had ever been taught. To get the truth, Sergeant Perez ordered 3 different men to pace the length of the track. We walked carefully along the path where the Titanoboa-sized creature had dragged its heavy, terrifying weight. The first man stepped carefully from the tail's mark to where the head had vanished. He reached the end and looked back, announcing a count of 31 long, deliberate steps. A second soldier repeated the process, his boots sinking into the mud with every measured stride. His count came in slightly higher, totaling 33 steps along the monster's winding, prehistoric path. Finally, the third man finished his count, confirming the terrifying reality with 34 individual steps. When 3 different men get the same measurement, can you still call it a hallucination? We stood in the humid jungle air, doing the mental math that chilled us to the bone. Based on those precise step counts, the squad estimated the snake reached 75 to 80 feet. That is not just a snake, that is a school bus, doubled in length and pure muscle. Lengthwise, it was like laying 3 telephone poles end to end right there in the Honduran mud. Where does a creature that large hide in a modern world without being seen by others? This was not just a predator, it was a living relic of a world that should have vanished. Sergeant Perez looked at us, the weight of the discovery finally settling over the entire patrol. 80 feet of scales and hunger had just crossed our path near the dark Rio Coco. We realized then that the jungle was not ours, and El Diablo was the true master here. 80 feet. That is not just a snake. That is a school bus, doubled and ready to strike. Why would the military care so much about a snake that they would lock a soldier in a dark room? The wonder of the encounter was quickly replaced by the cold, hard reality of Soto Cano Air Base. Following the incident, our squad received immediate orders to return to base for an urgent debriefing session. We left the humid banks of the Rio Coco behind, but the heavy silence followed us all the way. Upon our arrival, we were met not by friends, but by a major and 2 Honduran army officers. Standing beside them was a mysterious Honduran civilian, watching our every move with cold, calculating eyes. The atmosphere felt thick with secrets, as if the forest we left behind had finally caught up. At only 21 years old, I had no idea how to navigate the high-stakes world of military intelligence. They led me away from the squad and pushed me into a small, windowless interrogation room. A single, flickering light bulb hung from the ceiling, casting long, jagged shadows against the bare walls. Have you ever been told your own eyes were lying about what you saw in the jungle? The major sat across from me, demanding I repeat every detail of the encounter from the start. I spoke about the massive coils and the sheer scale of the creature that broke the water as surface. Once I finished, he didn't offer a word of comfort, only a sharp command to tell it again. This interrogation felt like a trap, with the major circling me just like the snake in the water. For the 3rd time, I walked through the nightmare, my voice growing hoarse under the heat of the bulb. What were they really trying to protect? The legendary snake, or the integrity of their secret mission? The repetition was a tactical weapon, designed to break my resolve and find a crack in my story. Each time I spoke, the Honduran officers whispered to the civilian, their faces obscured by the dim light. My mind drifted back to the 27th Airborne Engineering Battalion, wondering if they were facing this same pressure. The walls seemed to close in as the major leaned forward, his eyes searching for any sign of doubt. They wanted me to doubt the Titanoboa-sized shadow that had just changed my life forever. Every word felt like a weight, pulled from a memory they were desperate to contain and control. It became clear the major wasn't looking for the truth, he was looking for a specific answer. Sign the paper and keep your career, or tell the truth and lose everything tonight. The pressure inside that room finally peaked when the major's threats against me became official. At 21 years old, my entire future in the army was hanging by a single thread. The major leaned forward, his eyes cold as he laid out a very grim ultimatum. He claimed that my squad from the 27th Airborne Engineering Battalion had clearly made mistakes. He insisted the massive beast we saw in the Rio Coco was just a regular snake. According to his version, this ordinary anaconda was only roughly 20 feet long at best. I knew the truth, but the word muertos echoed through my mind like a warning. If I refused to change my story, the consequences would be swift and absolutely devastating. He threatened me with formal charges for allegedly falsifying an official military report about El Diablo. One single Article 15 would end my career before it had even truly begun for me. I felt like I was trying to fit a massive mountain into a tiny, narrow shoebox. Is a lie still a lie when it is being ordered by a superior military officer? My integrity was being weighed against everything I'd worked for at Soto Cano Air Base. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating under the weight of the military's demand. Under that immense pressure, I realized I had no choice but to pick up the pen. I began to officially rewrite the encounter that had changed my life forever in that jungle. I carefully scribbled that we had only seen floating logs and thick, tangled river brush. I added that the creature was merely a regular snake carrying a small, dead animal. The terrifying legend of El Diablo was being scrubbed from the record with every forced word. It felt like I was betraying my squad and the memory of what we truly witnessed. My report no longer described a Titanoboa, but a mundane moment on the Rio Coco. The truth was being buried deep beneath layers of official paperwork and these forced lies. With a single pen stroke, an 80-foot monster officially became a harmless pile of logs. The 1980s in Honduras were not just about the heat. They were about the cold reality of politics. Deep in the jungle, our presence at Soto Cano Air Base served a very specific and quiet purpose. Behind the scenes, The US was covertly funding the Contras to destabilize the region's socialist forces. Strict orders forbade us from engaging Nicaraguan forces unless they pulled their triggers on us first. In this delicate balance, a 75-foot biological anomaly was the last thing the military brass wanted. A giant snake in the Rio Coco would bring scientists and unwanted international scrutiny to our position. My commander knew that a pile of logs required no paperwork and triggered no messy investigations. The major leaned in close, his voice cold as he threatened me with falsifying official reports. If I did not change my story immediately, an Article 15 would end my military career. To the military, the truth about El Diablo was a liability they simply could not afford to keep. They preferred a predictable lie over a reality that could compromise our secret regional operations. The legend of the Rio Coco was buried under a mountain of carefully worded military bureaucracy. In the world of Black Ops, a monster is just a distraction from the real mission. But just because they erased El Diablo from the records does not mean it stopped hunting. Every man in the 27th Airborne Engineering Battalion knew the heavy cost of speaking out of turn. The jungle already felt heavy, but the weight of a forced silence was far more suffocating. Reporting a Titanoboa would have signaled that the Rio Coco was no longer under our control. The Major viewed my sighting not as a discovery, but as a direct threat to his leadership. He needed the mission to look perfect on paper, even if the truth was bleeding out. The fear of a court-martial outweighed the terror I felt when that snake first emerged. Military discipline relies on the belief that the report in the folder is the only reality. By claiming I saw logs, they could ignore the predator stalking the dark waters of the river. I soon realized the cover-up didn't end with a signature. It ended with my planned disappearance. Following that intense interrogation at Soto Cano, the military placed me under strict camp restriction. For 3 long days, I was confined to quarters, watched by men who once were brothers. The humid Honduran air felt heavier than usual as I replayed the encounter in my mind. Every rustle in the nearby brush made me wonder if the beast was still out there. My fellow soldiers looked away, silent witnesses to the pressure the brass was applying to me. During this period of isolation, a local Honduran soldier approached me near the perimeter fence. He didn't ask what I saw. He already knew the terror lurking in the Rio Coco. With a grim nod, he whispered the name that haunted the locals for centuries, El Diablo. He confirmed that the massive snake was no myth, but a living nightmare they all feared. That brief, whispered validation was the only truth I found in a sea of official lies. Soon after, my unit in the 27th Airborne was packed up and shipped back home. I expected my life to return to normal once we touched down on American soil again. But the shadow of the Rio Coco followed me, even across the thousands of miles home. For 1 month, I waited at Fort Bragg, wondering if the Army had forgotten my report. Then, the orders came down suddenly, pulling me away from my unit and my friends. I was being transferred to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, a move that felt like a soft exile. They moved me across the continent to keep me quiet, but memories are harder to transport. I wondered if the transfer was just a way to bury the witness and the truth. I finally left the jungle behind, but I carried the heavy name of El Diablo with me. Years after my service, the fossil record finally began to catch up with my recurring jungle nightmares. 60 million years ago, a massive 45-foot snake ruled the Earth with absolute and undisputed power. Science officially calls this ancient titan the Titanoboa, but I simply call it a terrifying close relative. Is it really possible for a species to survive 60 million years hidden in the dark shadows? Deep within the coal mines of Colombia, researchers recently unearthed the skeletons of these ancient prehistoric giants. Archaeologists estimated these massive snakes reached an incredible 40 to 45 feet in their total length. Finding the Titanoboa felt like finally looking at the biological blueprints for the monster I saw. If a 45-foot snake is a scientific fact, why is an 80-foot one considered a myth? My mind often drifts back to the humid air of the Rio Coco and that heavy shadow. While I was silenced by a threatened Article 15, the Earth was slowly revealing its ancient secrets. The 27th Airborne Engineering Battalion moved on, but the memory of El Diablo remains etched in stone. At Soto Cano Air Base, we spoke in whispers, but the fossils spoke with an undeniable authority. Even during the chaos of the Contras, the locals feared the water more than the soldiers' bullets. They knew the Rio Coco wasn't just a river, but a hunting ground for something truly ancient. Generations of villagers have passed down warnings about the great serpent that lives beneath the murky surface. Their fear isn't based on superstition, but on centuries of witnessing the impossible with their own eyes. I often wonder if the creature we encountered was simply the last of a forgotten prehistoric bloodline. The military tried to bury my story, yet the Colombian mines keep digging up the terrifying truth. We think we have mapped the world, but the deepest jungles still guard their prehistoric inhabitants well. The locals still won't go near that specific stretch of the river, even after all these years. Perhaps they understand something about the Rio Coco that modern science is only just beginning to rediscover. El Diablo is just a ghost story told by a veteran. It is a reality waiting to strike. Every story has a cost, and for Robert, it meant sacrificing a career for the absolute truth. Robert was only 21 when he saw El Diablo, carrying that heavy secret for many long decades. Today, he is finally stepping out of the shadows, and he is no longer the only one. You have to wonder if you would have signed those papers just to save your own future. The military demanded total silence, but the memory of that creature refuses to be buried in time. Whether it was a prehistoric Titanoboa or a hidden monster, the Rio Coco knows the dark truth. The truth is much like a predator. It eventually rises to the surface for all to see. We explore these forgotten corridors of history because the world is far stranger than we often admit. Over 60,000 of you have joined this journey to uncover the mysteries hidden from the public. Your support allows us to keep digging into the files the authorities would rather we just ignore. Every like and subscription helps us bring more voices like Robert's back from their forced exile. What else is hiding in the murky depths of the Rio Coco, waiting for its next witness? The legends of the 27th Airborne Engineering Battalion remind us that some secrets never truly die. We will continue to shine a light into the darkest corners of our strange and terrifying world. Thank you for standing with us as we piece together the fragments of these impossible accounts. If you have a story that the world needs to hear, do not let it simply vanish. Join our growing community of seekers as we pull back the veil on the truly unexplained. The jungle may be silent now, but the echoes of El Diablo still ripple through time. The shadows of Honduras still hide many secrets that defy every law of modern biology. Every witness who comes forward brings us one step closer to understanding the world's true nature. Robert's courage to speak out serves as a beacon for others who are tired of hiding. Your curiosity is the engine that drives this channel into the unknown every single week. Keep searching for the truth, because we will always be right here to tell it. We will be waiting for you right here to explore the next chapter of the unknown. Until next time, we will see you in the smoke pit for the next dark discovery.